What is your paranormal story? Redditor 41, I was camping in the 80s on Bluff Mountain between the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Punch Bowl Shelter. This area is part of the Appalachian Trail. Basically, you can camp anywhere off the dirt roads or trails. We were camped about halfway up Bluff Mountain for a week. Second to last day, we decided to do the day hike up to the top of Bluff Mountain, taking our time to explore on the way up. When we got to the top, we saw the old fire tower foundations, did some exploring and found the Oddie Klein Powell Memorial. You can Google his name to read about him. Remember, this is the late 80s, no internet, so us stumbling around and finding this powerful memorial where a child had died 100 years before us was profound. We stayed for a bit reflecting on the story and talking about it, then hiked back down the mountain to our camp. That night at our camp, we slept outside our tents because the weather was beautiful and it was our last night. The three of us slept in our sleeping bags lined up next to the fire, a few feet in between each of us. We dozed off to sleep. Every night, like clockwork, at around 3 a.m., we could hear a train whistle way off in the distance. It was kind of cool because if you happen to be awake, those of you who have roughed it understand that sleeping in tents or sleeping bags isn't the most restful sleep. You knew that the sun would be up in a few hours, and you had a sense for what time it was. I was stirring in my sleeping bag right after I heard the train whistle when I heard something coming. When you camp in places like this, you can hear the slightest sounds at night because there is nothing but animal movement, bugs, etc. I reached over and smacked my buddy on the leg to alert him something was coming. Keep in mind, it's pitch black in the forest in the middle of the night. Our fire was nothing but a few small embers, so the light it provided was minimal. I wake up my buddy as the noise is really loud and heading right at us. Noise stops, and standing directly in front of us in our camp in the middle of the night were two men with shotguns and a lantern. They were dressed in overalls and wearing boots and hats. Shotguns were lowered, but still, they had shotguns on us in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. I had the only weapon we brought with us in my hand in my sleeping bag, a CO2 powered pellet gun, which would have had little effect on two guys with shotguns. We brought it to keep animals away. All three of us were shitting bricks, scared out of our minds at this point, and it was like a standoff. Who's going to flinch first? They shined their lantern at us. We stared at them, waiting for those guns to be raised, which was silently understood by us, that if that happens, all hell's gonna break loose and probably not going to end well for us. Without a word spoken by us or them, they turned around and walked off. None of us spoke to each other until the noise of their movement was far away. We immediately got up off the ground, had a brief "what the duck just happened" conversation, and made the decision right there in the middle of the night to pack up and hike down to our car. We were off that mountain before sunrise. Years later, I began researching the story behind the memorial and the child who had died on that mountain. I spoke with a few local historians, and they had me speak to a professor down that way that was writing a book about the events of Oddie Klein Powell and his family's history in the area. It was he that told me that he thinks we had a direct encounter with the ghosts of that mountain, an idea that had never ever crossed my mind. I assumed they were moonshiners or poachers, who checked us out, saw we were young men and no threat, so they moved on. This professor believes we had a ghost encounter, because in his research he had many similar stories from others in that area over the years. Apparently, as the story goes, search parties worked those mountains day and night looking for this kid who was missing back in 1887 or 88. The professor believes we had one of these encounters with the ghosts of the mountains still looking for the boy. Redditor 42 worked in a restaurant that had the story of a patron who had died from choking in the back dining room. Multiple people had reported incidences like phone cord swinging when they were the only one there. Sounds of someone coughing or walking around. The wait staff said the candles in the back dining room would relight between when they were blown out for the night and the final walkthrough. I started out as the dishwasher there. I would constantly hear someone whistling in my ear. One day, we had been talking about the ghost and some of the happenings. I was standing in the wait station in front of the swinging door into the kitchen. This door was an old wooden door with the original hinges that were supposed to hold it open when needed. You could get them to work, but you had to push the door open several times and kind of wiggle it just right. It also had a diamond-shaped window to keep you from running into people coming through the other way. I was standing talking to Becky, one of the waitresses, while I was holding an empty dish rack in both hands in front of me. As I turned to go through the door, it swung in toward the kitchen side and stayed open. No one was seen through the window and the door stayed perfectly open. Becky and I turned back to each other with big eyes and just stare and then turn and stare back at the open door. The only other person there at the time was Mike, the cook. I yelled out, "Mike, where you at?" He calls back, "In the window." "Why?" I ask. "Did you open the door? What are talking about?" So I told him what happened. He walks over from the window, which was about 5 foot away. He looks at the door and said he had been in the window cutting veggies the whole time. No explanations for it and never happened again. I'm glad that one other person saw it. The ghostly happenings quit after they completely remodeled and made the back dining area part of the expanded kitchen. Redditor 43, to preface this, I'm as inclined now as I was then to not consider the following story a paranormal experience, but it was the only time I ever went through anything remotely spooky, and I am as clueless now as I was then about the truth of that situation, so I think I don't have a choice but to regard it as paranormal. My sister and I slept in the same bedroom when we visited our childhood home in the summer some years ago. One night we woke up to what seemed to be heavy jostling noise at our bedroom door. It became clear to us what the sound was immediately. Someone was forcing the door open by roughly twisting and turning the doorknob. We looked at each other with wide eyes, alert unease quickly replacing sleep. The knob shaking had obviously been going on for a little while now. It was incessant. And no one was speaking to us through the door. Not a low voice or whisper calling out. Nothing but the doorknob being turned forcefully again and again. "Is that Dad?" I asked my sister. When I woke she was already up. Maybe she even shook me awake actually. So maybe our father had called out before I woke up. But I knew that made no sense for several reasons, one being that she would have already opened the door for him. She also looked a little scared. That could only mean she thought it was probably not him or anyone else in the house. We had our grandma in the next room, and 2 aunts across from us. They didn't sleepwalk or have any other nocturnal habits of the sort. "I don't know," she whispered. We both knew it was highly unlikely. We were teenagers then, so we were probably more ready to imagine, well, the stuff of horror movies. But even in my half-asleep state I knew it was a legitimate fear. The person at the door forcing themselves in was not likely to be anyone we knew at all, including our father. He worked the night shift back then, and always told us ahead when he'd get home or if he would come home early. So that night, whether he had come home early or on time, we would have already been long in bed, so there was never reason for him to come knocking, let alone at 2 in the morning, which is when this all went down if my memory is any good. He had definitely never done it before. And if this was the first time, why would he do it by harassing the doorknob wordlessly? "Dad?" I called, knowing along with my sister that it could only be an intruder. No answer. Just whoever, whatever, if you will, it was on the other side of the door untiringly twisting the knob. I must have called out to the doorknob shaker a few more times and became equal parts panicked and annoyed because eventually I opened the door and even peered into the pitch black hallway. My sister freaked out a little at this. You can probably guess what I saw. Yeah, nothing. No one was there. It's true I could see literally nothing in the dark, but the doorknob was still being manhandled up until I opened the door. So they couldn't have gone anywhere in that instant without me detecting them, right? I even called out to my dad as soon as I saw there was no one, my fear partly shifting to confusion. His room was right next to ours, but I didn't hear any footsteps near it nor his door closing and opening. "I don't think it's Dad," I said to my sister. Soon my eyes adjusted enough for me to make out the dark corridor. There really was nobody. And the doorknob was silent again. That is, until I went back into our room. Can you believe it? Since we can all agree by now that wasn't a person or anyone I could account for. Didn't even wait for us to settle back into bed. The doorknob thrashing restarted a moment after I closed and relocked the door behind me. By the way, another reason it couldn't have been our dad, since he started going to the office at night, he specifically instructed us to keep our door locked after we got into bed. So it was a strange occurrence to us from the get-go. If it was an emergency, they would have banged on the door and yelled for us to wake up, whether it was Dad or an aunt or grandma. When I ponder it over again, the shoving of that doorknob is the most irrefutable thing to me, along with the voiceless urgency of it. We never heard knocking or banging on the door itself, just the insistent, frantic shaking to unlock the knob. Anyway, to keep it no longer than this already is, my sister and I lay in bed awake, terrified for the rest of the knob jerking, and really, the whole door itself, which lasted for 2 more hours at least. I remember drifting back to sleep at about 4. I also particularly remember sweating from the stress of just laying there having to listen and imagining what it could be. It was pretty awful. A few times we thought the door would break down, the frenzy would grow more desperate and reach a violent peak, so that I had to visualize what I'd do in case the intruder would be successful. They even actually stopped sometimes, and we'd think it was over, until they began again. Over and over for hours. I could almost make myself believe I was having a dream. Fear gripped me in a mix with bewilderment and anxiety, and I couldn't even offer any consolation to my equally horrified sister. But like I said, I think it died down and eventually stopped without us having to wait for daybreak. The next day we talked about it with wonder, dread, and disbelief, and acknowledged that it was very real. We asked our father, who told us he did come home the night before, but that he hadn't knocked on our door or dropped by our room. It was so late already, and there was no reason to. I don't think we told him why we were asking. Nothing was amiss that night, apparently no thieves or night robbers, no broken locks on the front gate. We didn't believe in the supernatural, and still don't, but until now, both of us can only conclude that it was something unexplainable. Edited grammar and stuff. Redditor 44, I've experienced it a lot when I was a kid and only once as an adult. While I was writing a few experiences, I felt a strange chill down my spine, so I'll skip the really terrible ones because I really don't want to remember that. But when my sister and I were kids, I'll never forget living in this house and always hearing my name get called. Woke up one night to my sister screaming and the light was green. Saw this kid watching her and I literally froze. Sister ran and turned on the lights and he was gone. I still don't believe in ghosts. I try my hardest to forget the terrible things I've seen. I don't want to believe it. I think logical, even though I cannot think of an explanation for some of the things I've seen. But I really feel sympathy for those who get called crazy for seeing things that they can't explain. I know exactly how they feel. Redditor 45, in Ottawa, Ontario, there is a hostel that used to be a jail. It is the last place in Canada that an execution took place. Legend has it that the place is haunted. I stayed there with my wife on Halloween 2019. You stay in a tiny former jail cell with communal bathrooms. It's super creepy but also really cool. When I stayed there, I experienced 2 things I would consider paranormal. One, during the night, on several occasions I awoke up to the sound of clanking. Almost as if a guard was walking by and dragging his baton along the cell bars. Doesn't seem like much, but I wonder. The second, I had a timer set on my phone to wake me up at a certain time. After it went off, I decided I wanted an extra 30 minutes to sleep, so I set another time and placed my cell phone back on the ledge. I awoke to my phone landing on me. Now my phone was completely on the edge and the charger was plugged in out of reach. When I was awoken by this, I grabbed my phone to see less than 30 seconds was left on the timer. Almost as if someone or something didn't want to hear the alarm again. Redditor 46, I live in a haunted house. Here are things that happen here. We all hear conversations taking place. They are very whispery, you cannot understand the words, just the separate voice tones. We have gone room to room, looked outside, checked any audio we might have playing. There has never been an explanation. One evening I went to make sure the front door was locked. Hubby said, "Don't lock that, daughter grown is outside." Me, "No she isn't." I go check. She is in her bedroom and says she has not left the room for quite some time and did not go outside. Hubby insists he saw her leave. One morning I get up, see daughter sitting at small kitchen table. She is drinking coffee. I wonder why she is home so late. She works a very early shift. Turns out, she had been gone for more than an hour when I saw her. Hubby lost a permanent marker, looked everywhere. Few days later he was complaining to neighbor who was visiting. They were sitting at the small table in the kitchen, popular place in the house, saying he really needed it. It dropped out of the middle of the air onto the floor. Hubby was shocked. Scared neighbor so bad he left. We think one of the ghosts is a child who likes to play. Hubby would go to bed, something would pull on his big toe. Several nights go by, I say, tell it to stop, so hubby does, explaining he had to get up early and needed to sleep. It stops. Months go by. We decide to prank hubby and have grandson belly crawl into the bedroom not long after me and hubby go to bed. We are old, no worries about any surprises there. Grandson succeeds, does it 3 times before hubby caught him. Everyone laughs. Grandson returns to the other area of the house, living area, to watch TV with his mom and sister. Few minutes later, a tug on the toes. Hubby yells for grandson. From other side of the house, grandson answers, what it wasn't, TM. So many more tales to tell. Been here years and years, these are just the ones I think of on the spot. Redditor 47, when I was younger, around 4 to 7, I was hiding under my bed sheets pretending I was hiding in a cave. I then heard something say hello and I saw from the corner of my eye 2 red eyes and a mouth of teeth. I screamed and my sister, who I shared a room with, got mum, but she found nothing. Another story in that same house. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw these tiny people running around the floor, but they were shadow-like. Like 3D shadows. I know it wasn't a dream because I made my sister take me to mom and dad and I slept in their room. I saw them again, but my sister was at camp. But my dad woke up at like 2 in the morning to get ready for work. He was in the kitchen making breakfast, so I slept in the lounge room. I know that was real because wisps were flying from the floor and I touched one and it reacted to the touch. The last experience was I heard my dad say good morning to me. He wasn't home. Ever since we moved from that house, I haven't seen anything paranormal. Except sleep paralysis. Which doesn't see it. Redditor 48, I lived in a house that was 100 years old. Several things happened. One night while my wife then girlfriend were asleep, a large decorative hookah flew across the house. It launched like 8 feet. Nobody in the room, cat was on the bed, cat jumped up from sleeping on me when it crashed. Zero explanation. One day my wife was in the kitchen doing dishes. I hear a woman's voice say something, but it was unclear. I said, what was that, honey? Her response was, I heard it too. Nobody lived there with us, open floor plan, it was whispered between her and I. One night I'm up on the computer, not super late. Suddenly kitchen cabinets all start slamming in a weird order. Slamming repeatedly. I finally spoke to whatever it was, and asked it to stop. We wanted to all live together. Something like that. When I said that, there was a pause, then one large cabinet opened wide, slowly, and started to slam, but right before it slammed shut it stopped, and closed gently. There were other incidents too that were smaller that I didn't include. All within the first month. But nothing crazy after that incident with the slamming where I said we wanted to live together. Nothing at all, until we were moving out. My son was born, and we had just bought a new house. All the activity seemed long ago. 2 years had passed, a marriage, and a baby. All activity happened in the first month or so, and it seemed like a distant dream. Then when we were moving, things with lights turning off on me would happen. Once I was leaning in a closet to grab things and it felt like I was pushed in. The closet door slammed shut, sliding door, so no big deal. But on the closet my cell phone started malfunctioning and I couldn't even turn on the flashlight. My brother came with me to grab one last heavy item. The whole house was cleared. As we are leaving he looks back in. There was a baby toy I didn't recognize just sitting in the middle of the floor we had just walked across. I swear it wasn't there just seconds before. My brother said, I'll grab it. My response, no, don't touch it. He knew the stories. He looked at me and suddenly said, good call. And we left. Never went back. It's so strange writing these stories down now. This was 10 years ago. Redditor 49, ooh, I've got a creepy one. It's not so much an act, but I'll explain anyway. When I was younger my brothers and my dad watched some horror film, don't know what the name was, but I hate horror films so I didn't watch. Anyway, after the film my brothers go to sleep, they slept in the same room with a bunk bed. My father slept in my room cause I had a pull-out bed below mine. I was really young at the time so it's not weird. A few hours into the night one of my brothers come to my room really distressed, sweating and everything. He says that he and my other brother feel really unsafe in the room and are having really bad nightmares. So me and my dad swap rooms with them and go to sleep. Here is where it gets weird. Me and my dad start having nightmares and sweats and keep waking up. Just a reminder, I never watched the movie. Regardless, we sleep through it. The next morning at the breakfast table, I'm describing the nightmare I had, and my brothers and my dad are looking at me like I just died. Then they say they had the exact same nightmare, down to every detail. I will never mess with horror films 'cause of that experience. Redditor 50, this is my dad's story. Growing up, he was always afraid of dogs, didn't like them, but he would never tell us why. He would always tell us to ask Abuelita, our great-grandmother. He grew up in a small remote village in Mexico, and once when we were visiting his hometown, everyone was sharing ghost stories about the town and their own experiences. We asked to hear why our dad was scared of dogs, and this is what we were told. Apparently one night when my dad was fairly young, maybe around 10 or so, a dog had gotten into the house. Stray dogs aren't uncommon, and there was courtyard in the center of the house or so. The older men would sleep with a machete nearby the front door and by the courtyard door in case an intruder tried getting in. So apparently 2 of my uncles woke up to this dog in the house, and it had glowing eyes. They didn't know if it was a sick dog or had rabies, so they killed it with a machete and left it in the kitchen to clean up in the morning. Well, in the morning the dog was gone. There was no blood or anything. Fast forward a year or 2 later, and my dad is taking the trash out to the backyard, which is beyond the courtyard or something, and there's this big black dog on the roof across from him with glowing red eyes. Apparently the dog starts talking to him, telepathically or otherwise, calling for it to come to me several times, and my dad finally bolts back into the house. The story seems too crazy to be made up, and I heard it from several older family members, and also explains why my dad never liked dogs. There were plenty of other paranormal things that would happen in this house and in the town in general. Redditor 51, so, I work in a stupidly old pub in the arse end of nowhere in the UK. In summer we get absolutely rammed, and it wasn't uncommon, as the head chef, for me to still be in the kitchen on my own at 2-3 a.m. There were plenty of staff stories about the pub being haunted, but I never paid them too much attention as they all seemed a little bit wild and didn't sound like they'd be out of place in a low-budget horror film. Anyhow, it's about 3 a.m. and I'm the only person left in the pub and have been for several hours. I'm just finishing up for the night and have started mopping. I always mop twice at the end of the day, once with a lot of water so the dirt lifts, then once with a dry mop to get it all off the floor. So I've done my first run with the mop and the floor is soaking wet. Whilst mopping, I have to kind of back out of one of the exit doors onto the pub floor to be able to reach every spot. I go outside to let the hot water and chemicals do their job, and I light up a cigarette. About halfway through it, I hear a sound like one of the doors close inside the kitchen. Now, where I'm standing has a view to all entrances and exits into the kitchen, and I would definitely have seen a person walking through and using a door, so I think nothing of it and assumed I was hearing something. I finish my cigarette and go back inside to dry mop. I once again have to back out of one of the doors onto the pub floor, and as I do so, I look down onto what should be a dry wooden floor. Only it's not, because there are wet footprints there. Some are mine, but the others are from someone barefoot. I'm not ashamed to say I got out of there pretty sharpish and drove home at a speed likely to put me in prison if I was caught. I checked the CCTV footage from that time when I was in the next day, no movement on the cameras at all. Redditor 52, I swear to God, when my dad was driving me home from school one day, I saw a spinning, floating cube that was moving the same speed as our car. I will not deny that I saw it, because I saw it clear as day. Redditor 53, about to go to bed at my grandparents'. Alone on the gallery. Creepy moonlight and fog rolling through the fields. I was about 10-14. I look at the stars and I see one star dancing from star to star. Bounce, bounce. Move down. Bounce, bounce. Move down. I couldn't believe it. I looked away for a second to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Looked back up and yup. The star kept dancing. Redditor 54, my house England was built just after the war. The surrounding 3 houses all had their residences die. Our house is just off. The feeling, always cold and noises. I have a baby toy in the loft that will start singing randomly early in the morning. There is no way I am going up there to stop it. My neighbor's cat got hit by a car across the road purposely, and I have seen a black cat running through my house. I know it's that cat because she had an accident and her tail was cut off. I explained to the neighbors, who also said they had seen her run through their house too. I followed, more like ran after her, into my outhouse where she disappeared. Things getting lost or moved. And a photo threw itself off my wall the other night and pushed down 2 family photos. I call the house Ghost Neagle. Redditor 55, I've got a few. I'm 5 years old and my mom and I just moved into a new house. It's always been just me and my mom at this point in my life. I was basically raised by my grandparents cause she worked so much, but no dad and no one else lived with us in the new house. I'm laying in my bed late at night like Nickelodeon had switched to Gorge Lopez late, and from my door I could see the whole living room. All of the sudden a big shadow rolls into the living room, human shaped and about my mom's height. I quietly yell out for my mom and the shadow's head turns to look at me and it has glowing green eyes. I hid under the covers for like 5 minutes, and when I peeked out it was gone, so I ran to my mom's room. She was out cold. Ever since I see this thing every time I move houses. Sometimes I see it just walking around in the day or sitting at my diner table, lounging on the couch, in the backyard, etc. It's never seemed hostile, just lost. So I don't mind him much anymore, but sometimes he scares the duck out of me. This one is just kinda weird but not really paranormal. So I read tarot, and I was giving my friend Jack a love reading. She was with this guy who she'd been on and off with for years. The reading basically said that there was infidelity in the relationship and she was going to go through a big change because of it. She jokingly called her boyfriend and told him about it and brushed it off. A week later she's sobbing on the other end of a phone call to me after she found out he was sleeping with another girl. Redditor 56, when I was little, my friends and I were really into scary stories like Bloody Mary, summoning ghosts, and the like. One day, as a dare, we were screwing around speaking gibberish and promising our souls to the devil if we could see a ghost. That night, I went to the garage to get something, and I swear to God I saw a blue orb floating in the middle on the garage. Everything felt cold, like a breeze had come in. I turned on the lights so fast and refused to go in the garage. Tried telling my parents, but they don't believe in ghosts. Since then, I've been afraid of being alone in the dark in my own house, but also becoming addicted to horror stories and creepypasta for a while. Redditor 57, this is a story my dad told me about his childhood. When he was around 15, one night around 11 or something, he was returning to his home from his aunt's home on cycle. When he was near a graveyard that was in the way of his and his aunt's house, a screw fell from his cycle's tire. He started looking for the screw on road in the middle of the night without light. He cannot go home without it because his home was too far away and there was no mechanics nearby. He was unable to find the screw. When he was about to give up and start walking home with his cycle, he saw a tall man who asked him if he needed help. He explains the man the situation. The man moves a few meters away from his place and picks up a screw from the ground. He then puts it back in my dad's cycle and tightens it by bare hand. My dad thanked him and went home with a thought in his mind that he'll go to the mechanic's shop in the morning and get the screw perfectly tight. The next morning he went to the mechanic and told the mechanic what happened and asked him to tighten the screw. When the mechanic tried to tighten the screw, he was unable to do that. He told my dad that the screw was completely tightened. The fact that it's obviously not possible for a normal person to do that, and my dad didn't see that man's face, makes him believe he encountered a ghost that night. Redditor 58, I keep telling this story, but what the hell, why not? TLDR, Mills Peninsula Hospital, or more specifically Mills Health Center in San Mateo, California, is totally haunted. Legit ghost patient who does ghost patient shit to get your attention. So, this was back in 2009, 2010 or so. I worked as an ER/RN at Mills Peninsula in Millbrae. It was during the swine flu outbreak, and we were especially busy with urgent flu cases. I was pulled for the first time to the fast track ER at Mills Health Center, which we were using like an urgent care, performing rapid tests for symptomatic flu patients. I was working with this super cranky battle axe, let's call her Esther. Esther didn't like anybody. But I didn't have time to try to make friends. It was freaking busy. The fast track ER was on the first floor in a U-shaped setup. Reception at the bottom of the U, the nursing station behind that, 2 hallways of rooms on the outsides of the halls. On the inside of the U was a makeshift lab you could walk through to the other side, then a big room on each side that we kept supplies in. Blankets, bedpans, that sort of stuff. This unit had formerly been the inpatient surgery ward, and those rooms in the middle had been set up with call lights at each of 4 beds. But the call bell system was disabled. It wasn't even hooked up to electricity anymore. We had this new system that was attached to the computer system with our badges as sensors. The old analog call bell system was just a box that was fixed to the desk at the nursing station. So in the room where we usually had supplies, we actually had patients in it that night. 4 patients, with curtains as dividers. No real privacy, but we were only using these rooms to keep patients in while they awaited their rapid flu test results. 1 hour, max. There was a huge influx of people, and we were discharging at quite a clip, too. So to cue the receptionist up that a bed in that big room was ready for a new patient to be put in it, we'd pull the curtain back so you could see the empty bed and fix it to the wall to stay open. If the curtain was pulled to obscure the entire length of the bed, there was a patient in there. We're turning and burning. STG, this is one of the busiest shifts of my life. Almost as bad as a 4th of July on a weekend. But at about 2 a.m., it starts to slow down. We decide we're going to stop using the big 4 bedrooms, so at this point, no one is in there. The curtains are pulled back so you can see all the beds, lights in the room are shut off. We've still got 10-12 patients in the hall beds, and when I go to get a blanket for one of them, the curtain in my 4-bedroom in the back is pulled around the 4th bed, indicating someone has put a patient in there for me. I go up front and go to Esther. Hey, I thought we weren't using the 4 bedrooms anymore. She confirmed it. We aren't. So how come somebody put a patient in there for me? I asked her, so I go back there. Pull the curtain back. No patient. Weird. I pull the curtain all the way to the wall again and tuck it behind the bed to keep it there. Not 15 minutes later, I pass the room again. Curtain is drawn down around the bed. Like all the way down and around the bed. It didn't just fall and hang loose where it fell. It's been pulled out about 10 feet in length, to go the entire length of the bed and then down and around the foot of the bed, and then stopped where it would need to turn again to go back up the other side. Okay, WTF? I go in there and pull back the curtain to look. Again, no patient. What the actual fuck? So like 4 a.m., we have no more patients and it's just me and Esther and the receptionist at the window. It's time to do whatever shift checkoffs we need to do, and Esther is walking me around the department, showing them to me. First time at Mills, remember? We pass by my 4-bedroom. The curtain to the 4th bed is drawn down around the bed again. Okay, now I know someone is fucking with me. I'm kind of exasperated, and pull the curtain open again, and fix it to the wall. Esther is, well, studying me. So I figure it's her. She wants to make me lose my shit. I don't. We keep on doing what we were doing. Like not a half hour later, I'm replenishing stock in the other rooms, and I go into the big room again to get I don't know what. The curtain is drawn down around that bed again. And I have to fix it again. Okay. I am done with this lady. I march right up to where she's sitting on her ass at the nursing station, thinking I'm gonna call her on this bullshit. I go up there and kind of start going off on her. Look, I know you don't get along with others, but maybe you should stop fucking with people, huh? Maybe if you didn't do that, other people and you might get along? You think? She looks at me. Asks me what I mean. I tell her she knows damn well that she's pulling that curtain in that room, making me think I've got a patient in there. Her doer, funny joke. Oh. You haven't heard. There's a ghost in that room. A ghost, she tells me. Straight-faced. Almost somber. Matter of fact, actually. Yeah, back in the day, on a busy shift I guess like in the 70s or 80s, there was a drunk guy brought in by ambulance who they figured just needed to sleep it off. They put him in that 4th bed, in the big room in the back. Where they forgot about him. And he choked on his vomit in his sleep and died. He's still in there, or his ghost is, she says. Then ISTG, like almost on cue, the call light goes off for that room. Chirp chirp chirping. The call light. The one that's not even hooked up to electricity. I can hear it. So can she. And the light for that room, bed 4, is lit up on the console. Sure as shit. The console that's not even plugged in. She just looks at it, and then looks at me, arms folded, one eyebrow goes up. I was still feeling exasperated at this point. I hadn't finished chewing her out. Those old call light systems can only be shut off from the bedside. So I have to go back there to turn it off. And I do. And that curtain is pulled back down, obscuring that bed. I had just pulled it back and tucked it behind the bed, between the bed and the wall, not even 2 minutes ago. She was the only other person there other than me and the receptionist, who sat in the window the whole time and never walked past us like she'd need to in order to get to that room. Esther had not gone behind my back and pulled the curtain around the bed again, either. I sort of got it just then. I felt like I was being sent a message. And I said, out loud, "Look, I'm sorry that happened to you, okay? But I'm not going to forget I've got a patient back here. I'm not going to just leave someone back here without checking on them. I promise." It was like the guy who died was just making sure someone did rounds back there. I could almost feel it. "Hey, check on me." Esther had followed me. "You're not scared?" she asked. "Nope. What should I be scared of? A ghost using the call light and just being generally annoying?" "Good," she said. "I'll tell them that you can come back here and work with me." High praise, coming from Esther. "And when he goes upstairs, you can go up there and calm them down, too." Yeah. Our ghost roamed. Up on the same day surgery failure ward, people who were supposed to go home but failed discharge criteria stayed there overnight. He liked to spin the office chairs at the nursing station. Just trying to keep you on your toes. I never experienced anything else. Just the multiple curtain pulling, call bell lighting, that one time. But whenever I got pulled to Mills, I went in and said hi. I think, if you remembered he was there, he didn't feel the need to get your attention. If you didn't remember he was there, well, prepare yourself for a ghost shenanigans all night. Redditor 59, random taping on my metal bed frame over the course of a year. Also, my room would get pitch black, like an abnormal pitch black, couldn't even see my hand in front of me. I had a lady who does exorcisms come over and get rid of it. She said it was a bad spirit trying to make me feel comfortable around it so it could possess me. She did some stuff, and just like that it was gone. I finally got a good night's sleep. Redditor 60, this happened during a trip to Japan. Halfway through our trip, my friend, boyfriend and I stayed at an Airbnb in Osaka. It was really late at night and we quietly entered the building's lobby with our luggage. Above the elevator doors we noticed a mostly black television screen with a faint light glowing in the corner. After pressing the up button, the television screen lit up to reveal an empty elevator. The faint light glowing in the corner turned out to be a screen that shows what floor you're on. I found the television creepy, but didn't tell my boyfriend and friend how I felt at the time. We finally let ourselves into the 5th floor studio apartment. The guys decided to head back out to get drinks from a nearby vending machine, but I decided to stay and unpack. Soon after, I heard them at the door frantically trying to get inside. They explained that on the way down, the elevator was acting strangely. Elevator stopped at 4th floor. Doors opened. Doors closed. Elevator stopped at 3rd floor. Doors opened. Doors closed. Elevator stopped at 2nd floor. Doors opened. Doors closed. At this point, they said they were looking at each other unsure of what to make of it, and then getting ready to defend themselves against whoever or whatever was messing with them. Elevator stopped at 1st floor. Doors opened. Nobody was there. After being reunited inside the apartment, we started to quietly unpack and unwind. It wasn't long before the doorbell went off. I don't know how to describe the next few seconds, other than synchronized panic. I held a finger to my lips, motioned for the guys to check, and tiptoed to turn off a nearby light. The guys carefully made their way to the door. They checked the peephole. Nobody was there. I didn't sleep well that night. The next night, our friend decided to go drinking with some other friends, so it was just me and my boyfriend at the apartment. My boyfriend had fallen asleep and I was hanging up laundry to dry. Then the doorbell rang. Without thinking about the previous night, I assumed it was our friend. I checked the peephole immediately, but all I saw was an empty hallway. I freaked out and woke my boyfriend. I didn't want to make any noise, so imagine me whisper shouting and gesturing wildly. He checked the peephole, and even went out into the hallway. Nobody was there. On our last night, we started packing up for our trip back to Tokyo. I was in a real daze, seated at a table covered with my clothing and souvenirs. I wasn't doing anything productive, and the guys were nearly done packing. Then I noticed something glowing inside a plastic bag. I thought it was my phone, so I reached inside, but then I realized it was a gashapon toy light, still inside the taped up plastic capsule. I held the capsule in my hand and the toy kept flashing away. The guys finally realized what was going on, and we all just stared at it with wide eyes. My friend then said, "Let me see that." And once he grabbed it away from me, the toy light turned off. The guys then took turns shaking and inspecting the toy within the taped capsule, but were unsuccessful in getting it to light up. After the trip, I opened up the capsule by peeling back the tape and popping it open. To use the toy light, you needed to remove a carefully placed sticker on the toy, pull out this tab, and turn on a switch. TLDR, strange things happen at Airbnb in Osaka, Japan. I made this face most of the time. Redditor 61, this happened recently to us. My BF and I were watching a movie in bed together. It was a comedy, luckily. I don't think I would be sleeping at his place anymore if it were a horror movie. The bed is in the corner of the room. My BF hung these pull-up racks on the wall next to the bed, which we mostly use as drying racks for clothes and wet towels. That evening a towel was just hanging there, as was a pair of jeans. There was space between the two items, which is important for the next part of my story. So we were laying in bed watching the movie when suddenly we both caught a movement from the corner of our eyes. The towel was swinging from left to right. Not like when the wind passes through it, but the entire towel was moving right before our eyes. We watched it swing for what felt like an eternity. The jeans, however, was not moving at all. It was like something passed through the towel. We had the windows and doors closed, so it couldn't have been anything else. We were pretty shaken up. I had some trouble sleeping as well that night. Redditor 62, well, more creepy than paranormal, but when I was very young, probably 6 or so, I had a large Grover doll in my bedroom. It was propped up on a table, and for some reason, one day I could feel it staring at me, and I stared back, and I was just scared and locked in, unable to pull myself out of this staring contest. And then it fell over. I freaked out, screaming, and ran out. This doll had probably been there for days, and decided to fall over at this particular moment. Redditor 63, for months I was seeing several dark hooded figures in my room late at night. They would come through the walls where the room was the darkest and would head straight for my bed. They didn't walk, they sort of floated around. They spoke to me telepathically and told me everything was okay and to not be afraid, but I was terrified. One of them would usually put its hand on my head to comfort me. Their skin was dark like a shadow and they had glowing red eyes. I only saw them for a few months and then never saw them again. This was when I was young, like 8 or 9. I've had sleep paralysis as an adult and I wonder if that's what it was. Redditor 64, high school retreat. We had to sleep in some old house overnight that was previously owned by the landowner around the school tradition. It was a huge villa-type home. History of the house was it was owned by the rich guy who died not in the home, and his wife donated the home to a cloister of nuns who converted it into a hospital for TB patients before converting it into a school. There are no records if anyone died or not or were buried on the grounds. Bear in mind this pre-med records. School staff had stated there were cold spots, whispering, and one woman working late saw a little girl reflected in a bathroom mirror out of the corner of her eye. She turned her back for 1 second only to hear something shatter, only to find the mirror had cracked. So of course, with these stories and about 40 plus girls, half who were less than happy to be there and the other half wanting to play Ghostbusters, no one was getting any sleep. My friends and I were in the midst of telling the others to keep it down, when there was a loud slam in a hallway that led to the bathroom. The room went cold and there was low, almost growling sound. My hair stood on end. Only the promise from the chaperones that any student found out of bed would be suspended for a day. Keep in mind the home was old and had much of the original furniture fixtures, so they wanted people not to damage anything, prevented everyone from running out of the room. Everyone eventually fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. The next morning, the chaperones woke us up angrily, asking why in the heck spent the night running back and forth in the hallway. Thing was, no one had gotten out of their sleeping bags. A friend of mine went to chaperone the next year and asked the ghost some questions. Turns out, there is something there, and I am afraid that she invited more in. Redditor 65, this was sometime during the 2020 quarantine. It happened to be one of the only times I was home alone. My dog and I were in the basement because that's where my Xbox was at the time. All of a sudden I hear something going through a full trash bag. Thinking it's my dog, I go upstairs to stop him. But then I remember he's downstairs with me and the noise was upstairs. So I decide to just take my dog for a walk. Thankfully I don't live in that house anymore, cause I have a lot of stories of that house besides this one. Redditor 66. I awoke in the middle of the night and saw a ghost sweatshirt hanging on the back of my door. Redditor 67. Live in a small town where a Civil War battle took place, albeit a very small battle. My good friend growing up lived on the more uppity historical district that had all the pre-Civil War era houses. I was super excited to be able to stay with him because they had a decent shed-looking building in the backyard. All brick, one window. They had it renovated, put carpet, a small bathroom, a kitchenette, and a small living area with a full bed that pulled down from the wall. As an 11-year-old boy with a Nintendo 64 and all-night access to a TV and snacks, and being from a lower middle-class family, I was pumped to stay in it. The inaugural River Boys 64 hideout. We even painted a small fucking sign saying that to hang in the window. Wild imaginations, I know. All goes well for the start. We crush Code Red, Mount Dew and snacks. Play Mario Kart and party as well as 007 for hours. TV as loud as we want, AC as cold as we want. We start to turn everything off and lay down to go to bed. Him and I just shared the full-size bed. Not long after we lay down, we start hearing chains rattling. Not very loud but not quiet either. Then comes a low hum, like a dozen people softly humming a hymnal. I have no idea how long it lasts, but being in so much fear it felt like forever. We laid there not saying a word after it ended, both of us terrified. After a little bit we start whispering about how we need to get back to his house. Literally flung open the door and just ran as fast as we could. We slept on his parents' floor that night. We told them about it, they heard nothing and had no idea what it could have been. After being scared about it for a few days we kind of just forgot about it. Senior year 2004. About 7 years later. We have to do a report on the town's history from the Civil War era. We could choose any topic we want and write about it. I wrote about the fact we had 32 saloons and 2 churches in 5 blocks of our downtown during the Civil War era. There was a girl in class they report about slave owners in our town. One of the facts she brought up was that out of the 17 homes in the historical district, 16 of them had slave quarters. She had gone around town and taking pictures of all the old slave quarters. One of the pictures that comes up on the PowerPoint is my friend's house. And there it was. What I thought was the large shed they had renovated was the old slave quarters. She had a picture of the front of the quarters. There in the window was a sign that read River Boys 64 Hideout. I am pretty sure my jaw hit the floor and I turned whiter than snow. Shook me to my core. That memory is seared into my mind. Edit, spelling and date correction. It's an estimate, so yeah. Redditor 68. So I am Japanese and when me and sister was home one day we heard a loud tap on back window. Sister was very scarred. So I went to go check but nothing there. After I went back to watch TV we heard sound again, sister and me now really scared. I waited for a while and thought must be prank from friend. But few minutes later the tap started happening again and again like tap tap tap. Me and sister were scared. But finally it stopped. Me and sister happy. We continue watching TV and then my grandma, I was at grandma's place, her name Tomoko, came in house and greeted us with some items from shop. We explained to Grandma Tomoko what happened in terror. She got suddenly scared and she told us to put papers on all windows and don't look outside. I asked her what it is, but she said not to worry. That night she told me go to sleep and she keep 4 rice bowls on each corner, and put paper on window like living room. She said don't come out of room until tomorrow 12 a.m., and no matter who calls me, not even her, don't come outside room. My grandpa returned from work after. Then my grandma tell him and he got very scared, he was very worried. But after I went to sleep I heard tap 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 on window throughout the night. I was scared. But I'm 21 now. Nothing has happened after tap 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 inside. Anyone else in Japan had this scary moment? Sorry bad English, I'm improving. Redditor 69, bro, this was when I was 6 or 7. I was in my sister's room where she had a huge windows, it was closed and no air could have come through. A picture frame was in her bolting and it suddenly fell. My sister and I both felt a breeze go past us, but how? And to top it all off, FFS, the door swung open. We couldn't sleep that night at all. It was horrifying. Redditor 70, not a good scary story, but it bothers me cause I'm not into any of this shit. I was gifted a cat when I turned 6, she was the sweetest thing. She passed at a good age and I swear plus 15 years later I still distinctly hear her scratch her nails on the carpet and wake up feeling the weight of her curled around my head. I really don't believe in ghosts or afterlife, but goddamn if it doesn't feel like she's still here sometimes.